Chicago, 1982. Agent Roy Lane stared at 7 faces pinned to his board. 7 victims, 7 shattered families, all died within 3 days. He'd never seen anything like it. Their only link, Tylenol. But the capsules they swallowed contained a poison so lethal it suffocated them within minutes. And it wasn't an accident, it was murder. A killer had opened bottles, laced the capsules, and perfectly resealed them, turning a regular purchase into a death sentence. Lane had no witnesses, no surveillance footage, no fingerprints. With 50 million capsules being produced and shipped daily, the entire country was a potential crime scene.
The 7th victim was a Chicago Airlines stewardess who died in her apartment after swallowing one disguised cyanide capsule.
What followed would terrorize the nation and trigger one of the largest manhunts in FBI history.
A massive investigation is underway to determine how the poison got into the pain reliever.
Over 100 investigators chasing leads from extortion letters to the Unabomber.
Paula was murdered. She was just murdered.
It brought a $500 million brand to its knees, forcing its CEO to defy the FBI and gamble the company's future on live television.
Johnson & Johnson will no longer manufacture or sell any capsule products made directly available to the consumer.
And yet somehow, these 7 deaths would spawn a billion-dollar industry.
Don't use Tylenol.
3 people are dead, and another is in critical condition tonight. Investigators say they are searching for, quote, a madman.
This is the story of the Tylenol Murders. On the morning of September 29, 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman woke up in her Elk Grove Village home with a sore throat and runny nose. Nothing unusual for a kid her age. Her parents, wanting to help their daughter feel better, gave her what any sensible parent would, an extra-strength Tylenol. Mary took the capsule and went to the bathroom, but only minutes later, her parents found her collapsed on the floor. Paramedics were called, and she was rushed to a local hospital. Tragically, she passed away later that morning. No one knew it at the time, but this tragedy would mark the start of a nationwide nightmare. Later that same day, another disaster was about to unfold in Chicago. 27-year-old Adam Janis had taken a sick day from work because he wasn't feeling well. He took 2 extra-strength Tylenol capsules. Minutes later, he collapsed in the kitchen, and paramedics rushed him to Northwest Community Hospital. He was pronounced dead at 3:15 p.m. Devastated by the news, Adam's family would later gather at his Arlington Heights home to mourn. His younger brother, Stanley, came with his new wife, Teresa. They were all at a loss. No one had a clue what had happened to Adam. The stress of the situation brought on a headache for both Stanley and Teresa. To feel better, they each took a Tylenol from the same bottle Adam had used. Soon, Stanley collapsed on the kitchen floor. Teresa collapsed in the living room shortly after. Stanley was pronounced dead at 8:15 p.m. the same day, and Teresa passed away at the hospital 2 days later. 3 members of the same family, gone. But it wasn't over. The mysterious deaths continued across Chicago's northwest suburbs. Mary Rayner, Mary McFarland, and Paula Prince would also be found dead in a similar fashion. Within 24 hours, Cook County Medical Examiner Edmund Donahue and his team started connecting these seemingly unrelated deaths. By October 1st, a total of 7 people had died across Chicago's northwest suburbs, all from different ages, backgrounds, and walks of life. But they all had one thing in common: Tylenol.
Officials began testing Tylenol samples at random from area stores, but could find no additional traces of poison.
The realization hit Donahue and his team. Someone had deliberately turned America's most popular medication into a weapon.
At this time, Roger, we have analyzed in excess of 39,000 capsules, an equal number of tablets. In response to your next inquiry, which is going to be how much has come in here, I can best describe it to you in terms of tons.
Lab tests would confirm Donahue's fears. The Tylenol capsules were altered. Someone had carefully opened the bottles, removed the capsules, and replaced the contents. Then, they resealed the packages.
Cyanide-contaminated Tylenol has been responsible for 3 deaths in the Arlington Heights area.
The killer chose their weapon brilliantly. Everyone trusted Tylenol, and it was everywhere. In medicine cabinets, purses, office desk drawers, you name it. Americans took it without a second thought. Meanwhile, they had no idea how many contaminated bottles were still out there, and that made Donahue's blood run cold. Now, every single bottle of Tylenol in America was potentially lethal. The math was terrifying. An estimated 50 million Tylenol capsules were being produced every day back in 1982. They were sold in hundreds of thousands of drugstores, supermarkets, and convenience stores all across America. The damage potential was insane.
This product may be contaminated with cyanide and should be destroyed.
Someone had turned the nation's go-to pain reliever into a murder weapon, and all fingers were pointing at one company.
Government officials said today they are considering criminal charges against Johnson & Johnson.
The conversation was, well, we need to recall.
The next day began like any other for James Burke, CEO of Johnson & Johnson. He was enjoying his morning coffee and having a conversation when the doors burst open. A panicked coworker barged into the room with news that would unleash a corporate nightmare. 7 people were dead, and their product was being blamed. 6 years earlier, Burke had become the CEO of the company, inheriting Tylenol as the star product. It had a 35% market share, generating $500 million in annual revenue. It was the ultimate cash cow. But now, it was killing people. Burke's team assembled within hours, but the news just kept getting worse. Testing had revealed the poison inside the capsules. It was cyanide. Cyanide is one of the most lethal poisons known to humans. Just 200 milligrams, about the weight of 4 grains of rice, is enough to kill an adult within minutes. The poison blocks your body's cells from using oxygen, essentially suffocating you from the inside out. Imagine someone depraved enough to conceal that inside medicine meant to help people. That person was still on the loose. Luckily for Burke and his team, they discovered that the tampering had occurred after manufacturing, not during. That meant Johnson & Johnson's factories were clean, but none of that mattered now. Their product was still the murder weapon, and their brand was currently being destroyed in the media.
Now, not only is extra-strength Tylenol off the shelves, Tylenol commercials are off the air.
They didn't worry about the money. They didn't worry about the impact on the company.
Burke had to make a decision that would either save his company or bankrupt it. At first, he started recalling certain batches of Tylenol, focusing on the Chicago area. This limited approach was supported by Wall Street, concerned about the financial impact. Why destroy the entire national market for a problem that was local? But Burke's gut told him something was different. If there were contaminated bottles in Chicago, there could be more. The killer could have struck in multiple cities, and every minute they delayed, more innocent people could be dying. Against the advice of the FDA, FBI, and even some of his own colleagues, Burke made the call. Total national recall.
All the bottles of extra-strength capsules were removed Friday as part of the nationwide recall.
The manufacturer ordered store owners to clear their shelves.
Some analysts predict the Tylenol brand name will disappear within a year.
Every bottle of Tylenol capsules in every store in America had to come off the shelves immediately. The numbers were staggering. 31 million bottles, $100 million in direct costs, potentially billions more in lost revenue and market share. Burke was essentially gambling with the company's future. Employees worked around the clock, pulling bottles from shelves all over the country. Every Walgreens, every CVS, every grocery store in America. If it said Tylenol on the label, it had to go. They offered to swap any Tylenol bottle, no questions asked. Just bring your bottle and get a safe replacement. As Johnson & Johnson scrambled to save its reputation, the feds were preparing their own investigation. But then, Burke did something that shocked the corporate world. He appeared on 60 Minutes, the most-watched news program in America. He expressed compassion for the victims and commitment to preventing future incidents. To many, Burke's TV appearance looked like empathy. To others, it was strategy. In any case, Wall Street went into a panic. Johnson & Johnson's stock price collapsed and investors fled. Competitors like Advil entered the market to steal Tylenol's market share. Experts even predicted that the Tylenol brand was finished and that no consumer would ever trust it again.
Scared, really, that somebody could have tampered with some of the other products.
Even Burke's team questioned him. Why go on TV and take the blame? It's not like the company was responsible for the deaths. But Burke was playing a different game, which would reveal itself much later. Internally, Johnson & Johnson faced enormous challenges. The switchboards were lighting up with calls from media, hospitals, and panicked customers, with many making false reports of poisonings. The company had to manage the crisis while dealing with public fear. The people wanted an answer, but Johnson & Johnson didn't have it. Meanwhile, the murderer was still out there, and behind the scenes, the FBI was mobilizing. They were about to launch one of the biggest operations in agency history. FBI agent Roy Lane stared at the photos strewn across his desk. 7 innocent faces were looking back at him. If his time with the Bureau had taught him anything, it's that every criminal eventually makes a mistake. As he studied the evidence, a troubling thought crept in. What if this one hadn't? They went on to launch a joint investigation that was immense in scale. Over 100 investigators were assigned to the case as part of a 15-agency task force. Then they started interviewing thousands of potential witnesses, testing thousands of bottles, and following every single lead. It cost millions of dollars and countless man-hours. Agents examined the security footage, but back then, cameras were rare. Only one in Walgreens had captured victim Paula Prince at the register, and even there, no cameras covered the aisles where tampering could have occurred. They analyzed fingerprints, traced manufacturing codes, and even built psychological profiles. But the killer was a ghost. Then, on October 5th, a letter arrived at Johnson & Johnson. It made the investigation take a dramatic turn. The handwritten message was chilling. As you can see, it is easy to place cyanide, both potassium and sodium, into capsules sitting on store shelves. If you want to stop the killing, then wire $1 million to bank account number 844-9597 at Continental Illinois Bank. But the author had made a crucial mistake. They signed the letter Robert Richardson, an alias that investigators would soon trace back to a James Lewis. Finally, they had their breakthrough.
Authorities today stepped up their search for the man accused of demanding $1 million from the makers of Tylenol to prevent further murders.
FBI agents tracked Lewis down and arrested him. He was a 36-year-old man living in New York under different names. But what they found confused them. He admitted to writing the letter, but insisted he had nothing to do with the murders. Lewis claimed he didn't want the money, but to embarrass his wife's former boss. He was trying to have the extortion payment sent to the employer's bank account. In fact, he had actually left Chicago on September 3rd, about 3 weeks before the murders. He then claimed he was in New York at the time of the poisonings. The feds couldn't place him in Chicago during the murder spree. But Agent Lane wasn't convinced. The timing was too perfect. Lewis was later convicted of extortion and served nearly 12 years. But here's the thing that kept Agent Lane awake at night. They could never prove he was the actual killer. The evidence for murder just wasn't there.
Did you feel then that you were on trial for the Tylenol murders?
I did.
Did you commit the Tylenol murders?
I did not.
Do you know who did?
I do not know who did, no.
Lewis was released in October 1995, still claiming innocence. In later interviews, he still insisted he'd only written the letter to embarrass his wife's former employer, but that he'd never actually killed anyone. But in February 2009, nearly 30 years after the murders, FBI agents showed up at Lewis's home in Massachusetts with search warrants. The FBI cited advances in forensic technology as the reason for the renewed investigation. They tore apart his house looking for any evidence that might connect him to the original crimes, but they found nothing new. No smoking gun, no confession, nothing. Maybe Agent Lane was wrong after all. Maybe Lewis wasn't their guy. Then, 2 years later in May 2011, the investigation took an even stranger turn. They requested DNA samples from Ted Kaczynski, the notorious Unabomber who terrorized America with mail bombs. The theory was that Kaczynski, a brilliant but twisted person, might have used the Tylenol murders as a testing ground for his anti-technology crusade. Kaczynski refused to give them any DNA samples. It was a dead end. But it wasn't over yet. Some theories suggested Lori Dan as a possible suspect, a disturbed woman who terrorized Chicago with random acts of violence. During her 1988 rampage, Dan had prepared poisoned rice cereal snacks and juice boxes with diluted arsenic, and she shot 6 children at an elementary school, killing one of them. While she was certainly capable of violence and poisoning, the timeline didn't align. Her crimes occurred years after the Tylenol murders. Even more bizarre, agents pursued leads on Roger Arnold, a 48-year-old dockhand. He also appeared to be an amateur chemist and had access to cyanide. The man had been acting strange and telling people at a local bar that he had cyanide in his home. When investigators tracked him down and searched his house, they found test tubes and manuals about explosives and poisons, but no actual cyanide. The task force ultimately eliminated him from suspicion. Meanwhile, the murders started something almost worse than the original crime: copycat attacks. On multiple occasions, years later, poisoned medicine appeared in stores across the country. Someone put cyanide in Excedrin bottles in Washington state, killing 2 people. Another killer contaminated Sudafed in Washington state. For a while back in '82, Americans stopped trusting any over-the-counter medication. Parents were instructed to throw away their Tylenol, and pharmacies took extraordinary precautions. The simple act of taking a pill was now considered a deadly risk. Congress responded by passing federal anti-tampering laws, making product tampering a federal crime punishable by up to 20 years in prison. In cases where tampering resulted in death, the penalty could be life imprisonment. But for the pharmaceutical industry, these murders would become a blessing in disguise. At the time, maybe James Burke was the only one who saw it. You see, these days, every medicine bottle in America requires tamper-resistant packaging. After the murders, they started developing new safety seals, foil barriers, and child-proof caps. An entire industry was born from the murders. The numbers are insane. The global tamper-evident packaging market was valued at $2.2 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach $4.6 billion by 2033. What started as an emergency response became one of the most profitable sectors in manufacturing. Companies like 3M, Avery Dennison, and dozens of others built entire divisions around security packaging, all because a sick individual put cyanide in Tylenol bottles. Decades later, we still don't know who did it. You see, back in the 80s, Americans never questioned the safety of products on store shelves. Tampering wasn't something people imagined. Social trust was much higher. Add to that the lack of forensic technology and surveillance, and you have a recipe for disaster. Ultimately, the killer had exploited the perfect storm. And Johnson & Johnson, they didn't just survive the crisis, they thrived. After hitting rock bottom in 1982, today, the company is worth more than $445 billion, making it one of the most valuable corporations in America.
My brothers were it was everything to me. We all love each other, you know. Everything we try so hard in this country was going okay for us, and one day everything fall apart.